Adam Goldberg is a former associate special White House counsel under President Bill Clinton from 1996 to 1999. He worked for President Clinton when he went under oath managing his own scandal. And Eric Columbus is former senior counsel to the Deputy Attorney General under President Obama. Let me ask you the same question, Adam. When President Trump said 100% that he'd go under oath, if you were his lawyer, would that be the point when you had your stroke?
Well, maybe a little bit. I think he recognizes probably, Mr. Kasowitz, that President Trump, if he ends up testifying, it's going to be years down the road, certainly never before Congress, and not with the Republicans in control at least, and at most just before a grand jury a few years down the road if the obstruction investigation ever gets that far.
Eric?
I agree with Adam. I think this is just kind of theater by Donald Trump. He wants to match up well against Jim Comey, and says, "Sure, I've got nothing to hide. I'll talk to anyone."
So you don't think that this testimony is going to be pushed? You don't think this testimony is going to happen?
Not next week, shall we say.
Why do you say it's going to take so long?
Well, where the investigation, if it's in obstruction, is just beginning right now. He's got a whole range of witnesses. For example, if you're Mueller right now, you want to talk to Reince Priebus. You want to talk to everybody who was in the room who was asked to leave, so he could talk to Comey alone. And you want to ask, well, were you there? Did he in fact ask you to leave? And what did he tell you after about that conversation?
Eric, how do you prove this case? I mean, not prove this case. I mean, how do you look for the facts?
Well, I think you start at the bottom and you work your way up. You've got the people who, in addition to the ones who Adam mentioned, you've got the people who Jim Comey apparently spoke to shortly after the events that were recounted in his memos. People of the FBI. You've got Comey's friends, such as Ben Wittes and Daniel Richman, the Columbia law professor who apparently received the memos. You've got a whole sort of people in the White House to work your way up to. And the president is at the very top of the pyramid. He's the last person you're going to talk to, if at all.
Do you have any problem with the way Comey released that memo through a cutout?
You know, I'm less bothered by how. If I had my preference, he would have called a press conference, released the memos, and told everybody the day after he was fired.
What does it tell you that he didn't?
Not much, other than he's just a political actor as well as a law enforcement official. And I think he probably felt pretty chapped over what happened, the insults that came his way, and he wanted to put it out. And as he said, he wanted to cause a special counsel, and he got that.
Eric?
I think this whole narrative of Comey as leaker is frankly bananas.
Why?
Because if anything, if a government employee did the same thing, we would be praising that person for being a whistleblower. And anyone who tried to retaliate against that person would be slapped down under the Whistleblower Protection Act.
Except, let me ask you, is that this was after he left employment, which makes a difference to me. But, and, you know, I don't know whether he did anything before when he was still employed by the government as FBI. But the job of the FBI generally is to investigate when there's a leak investigation. That's their job. They're doing the investigation. And at least it turns out that, I mean, if he did it during his employment, we don't have any proof of that. That, to me, you know, is not insignificant.
He was, well, I think that it did apparently occur right after he was fired.
Yes, definitely afterwards. There's no question on this. No question on this.
And I mean, to me, it's the analogy is to someone in government who learns that her boss improperly fired a colleague because he didn't like the way the investigation was going that her colleague was handling. And then say she knows there's a memo that discusses it. She finds it in her colleague's files and provides it to the New York Times. Under the Whistleblower Protection Act, you're allowed to reveal evidence that you feel shows abuse of authority by a federal official if you're a government employee. And you cannot be retaliated against for doing that, even if you bring it to the press. Unless it's classified.
And let's remember, there's no executive privilege claim that could happen here. There's no State Secrets Act in our country.
No classified information.
No classified information.
As far as we know, we haven't seen it, but we make that.
The only person who this is reason sensitive is because it inculpates Donald Trump.
How hard do you think it is to represent Donald Trump as a lawyer?
I think it's impossible. I can't imagine, because I don't think he probably listens to advice. I don't know that you could actually trust him to give you advice. I think this is one reason why he's using his outside counsel rather than his inside counsel. Probably he doesn't want to tell anything to Don McGahn and any of the White House staff, and he's hoping what little he has to tell his outside counsel will be protected by attorney-client privilege.
How disruptive is this?
It's
to
incredibly,
the business of the White House.
It's incredibly disruptive. They have nobody inside the White House who's actually talking for them. They can't trust the president's personal lawyer to safeguard them or their interests. So they're just left on their own in an island with a president who clearly is looking out for number one.
To Eric, do you think they're tapes or not? I mean, we're all guessing and flying blind on this tonight, but based on the president's comments.
I think he's bluffing. I thought that from the very beginning. It's just his macho preening. Better hope there are no tapes, because I got something. He's got nothing.
And even today, his comments today about very soon, and we're not going to like it, whatever that means.
Donald Trump has a history of saying that things will be arriving in a couple of weeks that seem never to arrive. I won't hold my breath.
He's a tough client to represent, I must admit, and we'll be watching to see what happens. Anyway, thank you both.